Barbara Schreiber was born on March 21, 1961, and went by the nickname Barbie, and her best friend, Belinda Darlene Zetterower, who went by her middle name, was born on January 24, 1961. They were both described by teachers and neighbors as very sweet girls. In June of 1975, 14-year-old Barbie and Darlene had just finished their 8th grade year at Agnes Middle School and were looking forward to starting their freshman year of high school. Unfortunately, they would never get the chance. On Wednesday, June 18, 1975, Barbie and Darlene left their home in Hollywood, Florida, to spend the night at another friend's house. The girls were known for hitchhiking around town, and this day was no different. After sitting down on a bench, a white van pulled up next to them and offered them a ride, which they accepted. Sadly, they would never be seen alive again. Another friend by the name of Gail Cavaco was supposed to go with them that day, but thankfully, her father wouldn't let her. She even witnessed the girls getting into the van on the day they disappeared. When they failed to return home by Thursday night, their parents called the police. They had no idea that their bodies had already been found that morning by a family fishing in an area known as Andytown near I-75 in the Everglades. They had both been sexually assaulted and shot to death. With little to no leads, the case would go unsolved for the next 50 years. In 2023, with the help of DNA and forensic genetic genealogists, investigators were able to identify the suspect as Robert Clark Keebler. However, he died in 2019 before he could be arrested for the murders. Keebler had a history of crimes, including armed robbery, sexual assault, and aggravated assault from California to Florida. Investigators believe Keebler may have had help from another individual who has not been identified. They also wonder if he could be tied to the Flat Tire murders, which saw at least a dozen girls murdered in Broward County between 1975 and early 1976. Thankfully, their families at least have some long-awaited answers. Mary Agnes Moroney was born on May 10, 1928, to parents Catherine and Michael in Chicago, Illinois. In the spring of 1930, Mary's mother, Catherine, was 17 years old and pregnant with her third child. No, that's not a mistake. It appears that Catherine and Michael married when she was 13 and he was 27. On May 15, 1930, a woman calling herself Julia Otis, claiming to be a social worker, was visiting the family for a second time. Otis found out about the couple after they placed an ad in the newspaper asking for assistance and brought them some gifts. During the second visit, she asked if she could take little Mary shopping for some clothes, and Catherine agreed. After leaving, Mary was never seen again. At some point, the Moroneys received a letter from Otis saying she'd taken Mary to California and would return in a couple of months. Here's the letter in its entirety. Please don't be alarmed. I have taken your little girl to California with me. I have hired a special nurse to care for her. We'll be back in 2 months. By that time, you will be on your feet again and will be able to care for her. She didn't even cry a bit. She is outfitted like a princess. In the meantime, I'll help all I can to get you on your feet. Don't worry about her or anything else. When you get this letter, we'll be on our way already. As ever, Julia Otis. However, 2 weeks later, Otis's cousin Alice Henderson wrote the family and told them a different story. She said her cousin had lost her husband and baby a year earlier, and now she was, and I quote, love hungry. After the second letter, the Moroneys would never hear anything from them again. Investigators believe the letters might have been written by the same person because the handwriting is the same. It's unclear at this point who Otis really was, but Mary ended up in the hands of Jeanette and Frank Darris, and they raised her as their only child and named her Jeanette. Her adopted mother's full name was Jeanette Caloric Darris, and it's unknown whether or not she was Otis. In 1934, 4 years after Mary's abduction, her new family moved to Virginia. At some point in her life, Jeanette and Frank informed her that Jeanette was not her birth mother, but nothing else ever came of it. In 1952, Catherine got a shred of hope when a 24-year-old woman by the name of Mary McClelland came forward and claimed to be the long-lost Mary Moroney. Somehow they were able to identify her as a member of the Moroney family by examining her skull and blood. Catherine even met McClelland and claimed to recognize her. However, a doctor by the name of E.W. Mathis came forward and said he knew McClelland and had delivered her on November 17, 1927, to an unknown mother. Her adoptive mother also provided a photo of her from 1928, proving she was adopted 2 years before Mary was kidnapped. Mary also had a scar from a ruptured navel, but McClelland was missing that scar. As for the real Mary, she went on to have 3 children of her own and was married twice. She also worked as a nurse for the last 50 years. Unfortunately, in 2003, Mary, aka Jeanette Burchard, passed away in Florida without ever learning who her real parents were. When grandchildren from the Moroney family began doing DNA testing, they discovered they were related to Jeanette Burchard and her daughter, Terry Arnold. Terry had also done a DNA test and was surprised to find her ancestors came from Ireland and not Poland, as she always thought. Through the DNA testing, Terry was able to connect with her long-lost cousins, and from there, they realized that Jeanette Burchard was really Mary Agnes Moroney. Mary's parents went on to have 8 children, and sadly, Mary never got to experience her large family. At least in the end, Terry was able to connect with her cousins and exchange photos of their lives they never knew existed. Mary Mathis Davis was born to Bert and Agnes on February 12, 1958, and grew up in Davidson County, North Carolina. In the spring of 1987, 29-year-old Mary was a mother of 2, married to Richard Davis, living in Lexington, North Carolina. She also worked at Lanier True Value Hardware, which is now called Lanier Ace Hardware. On May 30th, 1987, Mary headed to work, and everything seemed fine until she left for lunch and never returned. When she failed to show back up, coworkers waited a few hours and then called and notified her family. They quickly reported her missing, and a search got underway. The following day, her body was discovered behind Revo Drug Store, about a 20-minute walk from the hardware store. She had sadly been strangled to death. They were able to collect evidence that would later be used for DNA testing, but they were unable to lock down a solid suspect at the time. Many leads were followed, but unfortunately, they all led to a dead end. In 2022, investigators enlisted the help of Othram and their genetic genealogy team. From there, investigators were able to identify the suspect as Russell Grant Wood. Sorry, I was unable to find a photo of him. Wood would never be arrested because he died in 2013 at the age of 58. It's unclear what he and Mary's relationship was, but they definitely knew each other. While Mary's family was sad that Wood would never face justice, they were happy to at least have some long-awaited answers. On May 13, 1998, the remains of a female were found in Spartanburg, South Carolina. The woman was nude with ligature marks around her wrist. Her death was ruled a homicide by suffocation. Then on September 25, 1998, a mowing crew shockingly found the human skeletal remains of a child underneath a billboard off Interstate 85 in North Carolina. At the time, the 2 cases were not connected and would remain that way for the next 20 years. During that time, the child became known as the boy under the billboard. In 2018, an investigator stumbled across the remains found in Spartanburg and thought they may be connected to the child's remains found in North Carolina. From there, and with the help of DNA, the woman was identified as Myoung Cho, and the boy was her son, Robert Adam Whitt, who went by Bobby. Sadly, for the last 20 years, their family assumed they were living back in Korea. Bobby was born in Michigan on January 7, 1988, but raised in Ohio. He was described as having a bright smile and a gentle heart. Now that they were identified, investigators set out to find their killer, and it wouldn't take long to track down Myoung's ex-husband, 57-year-old John Russell Whitt. Whitt was a member of the U.S. Air Force and met Myoung while stationed in South Korea. The 2 then married and began living in South Carolina. It was after that Whitt began having an affair and wanted Myoung out of his life, so he made the decision to murder her. After she was dead, his mistress moved in with him but didn't get along with Bobby, so he killed him as well by suffocating him to death. He then told the mistress that Bobby went to South Korea to join his mother. In 1999, Whitt was arrested for several armed robberies and has been in a federal prison ever since. The sentence for the armed robberies is not supposed to end until 2037. During his confession, he blamed the murders on lust and said he never stopped loving Myoung and his son Bobby. He said that the murders continue to haunt him, and he tried to take his own life in prison in 2001. In the end, he pleaded guilty to both counts of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 26 to 32 years for each murder to be served consecutively. Tammy Lynn Sellers Holland was born on December 21, 1963. In the fall of 2014, 50-year-old Tammy was a mother to 2 adult sons, living alone in the J&R Mobile Home Park in Trinity, North Carolina, and working at Elizabeth's Pizza, where she had been for the last 11 years. Those who knew her well described her as a kind, energetic hard worker. That is, until her life was tragically cut short. On October 28, 2014, a neighbor by the name of Jerry Lynn Bradley saw lights on in Tammy's trailer. Since she was supposed to be at work, she thought something might be wrong and went to check. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. She left, but couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. Thankfully, when she went back this time and began pounding on the trailer, Tammy's dog appeared at the window, moving the curtain just enough for the neighbor to see her legs. She then quickly called 911. When police arrived, they entered the home and sadly found Tammy dead from multiple stab wounds. Investigators didn't have many leads to go on, so they began going door to door in the neighborhood, but nothing came from it. Unfortunately, the case would then go unsolved for the next 9 years. In 2020, the case was reopened, and investigators set out to re-interview Tammy's neighbors, including Roy Lee Whitt and his wife, Florence Keene. They tracked Whitt down to an Econo Lodge in High Point, North Carolina, and in a shocking turn of events, he conveniently identified Tammy's killer as his wife, Keene, who died in 2018. Whitt was then arrested and charged with felony accessory after the fact of first-degree murder. The evidence they have against him has not been released to the public. As of May 2024, Whitt's court case is still pending. As a bonus, I have 2 identified cases. The first case occurred in September 2022 when skeletal remains were discovered near the Marble City Outdoor Classroom in Knoxville, Tennessee. Knox County Regional Forensic Center determined the remains belonged to a male about 6 feet tall between the ages of 38 and 55 years old. No foul play was involved, and they were unable to identify the person. Investigators first tried radiographs and dental x-rays, but both were unsuccessful. In 2024, Knox County Regional Forensic Center enlisted the help of Othram and their in-house genealogy team. From there, along with additional investigative work, the man was identified as Tony A. Brown Jr. Very little is known about Tony besides him being born on March 20, 1988. The second case occurred in March of 1978 when a hunter spotted a body in the Mississippi River near Ellsbury, Missouri. When authorities arrived, they found the remains of a female, and it was estimated she had drowned about 4 months before being found. Unfortunately, her death was ruled undetermined due to the level of decomposition. The only thing they had to go on was a tattoo on her left arm that appeared to read D. Unable to identify her, she became known as Lincoln County Jane Doe, and it would remain that way for the next 45 years. In 2023, Lincoln County Coroner's Office partnered with the Southeast Missouri State University Anthropology Department. From their analysis, they determined that the Jane Doe likely died when she was just a teenager rather than the 30 to 40 years that was originally estimated. Unfortunately, the remains were poorly preserved, and her identity could not be determined. so they partnered with Othram, and from there, they were able to identify her as 15-year-old Helen Renee Grooms, who disappeared on her birthday in October of 1977 from Ottumwa, Iowa. As for the tattoo, it actually read Dale, which was a nickname for her boyfriend at the time. Her family had been looking for her for years and had been investigating her disappearance themselves. Her uncle believes her stepfather killed her. He said he was a bad person who beat the kids in order to scare them. Allegedly, on the stepfather's deathbed, he admitted to killing her. It's unclear if they will continue to investigate her death, considering her stepfather is now dead, but at least the family now has some long-awaited answers.